In the same time, the first Indo-Aryan technology prototype trials did not go by unnoticed. The military had come up with a more efficient parade than secrecy. At about the same period, Kenneth Arnold, U.S. Air Force pilot and CIA agent, launched the greatest operation in manipulation ever concerning the existence of UFOs. Making people believe they didn't exist was not the right solution and clearly insufficient. Discrediting enemies and frightening the population by systematic misinformation proved far more efficient. UFOs and parahuman belong henceforth to the movies, television, and collective paranoia, and not to the realm of scientists, as it should have been the case. In May 1947, the American Secret Services discovered the existence of an ancient terrestrial UFO secretly recovered by the Russians, which had crashed into the Altai Mountains along their border with Mongolia. Tension between the two blocs immediately rose a serious notch. The discovery was spectacular, and so not to lose face, the Pentagon, in tandem with the CIA, decided to tell lies and imagine a huge bluff to convince both the Russians and the world at large that they too recovered an UFO in Roswell in July 1947. Of course, it wasn't true, but the bluff worked all the same. In February 1949, just after the so-called Roswell incident, an UFO was photographed and filmed in Antarctica. It was the first photo of this type of a cigar-shaped object. Other appearances were then to follow in one another by cyclic waves. At the same moment, the Apollo program, headed by Werner von Braun, was in full swing, and Dr. Braun in no way favorably welcomed the demand for paranormal experiments, which nevertheless took place during certain Apollo missions. This is the last known experiment on psychic and telepathic amplification, as well as detection of psytron particles emitted by the yogi towards the Apollo capsule. But these tests were all eclipsed by the systematic appearance of unidentified objects around orbital flights and the discovery of traces of civilization on the moon. NASA had to face an avalanche of data and embarrassing proofs. The only solution was to put everything under the cloak of defense secret. In 1971, the Jason Directive set up a special retouching service whose purpose was to erase all signs of civilizations or ruins on the moon, especially in those photos intended for the general public and the press. In June 1965 has appeared this in a satellite report in the area of Deception Island, south of Argentina. The Russians tried to sabotage the refloating operation in vain, despite the violence of the confrontation. The flying object was finally brought back to Edwards Air Force Base in California. And 10 years later, the first anti-gravitational drone using magneto-hydrodynamic propulsion, or MHD, made its debut test flight in the desert around Edwards Air Force Base, where a number of prototypes came into being. The Belgians got a small glimpse of so-called UFOs in 1989 and 1990. The incriminating model was a triangular-shaped Astra TR-3B or XR-7, capable of flying in total silence at more than Mach 10. Now I would like to speak to you about another concrete application of such technology, the B-2 bomber, whose development started in 1982. The official B-2 stealth bomber, which flew for the first time in 1989, was to serve as cover for another unconventional B-2 to be built in parallel. This top-secret model used, among other things, a plasma creation system. exploiting the airflow like an MHD generator. This system produces ionization of the air around the B2, thereby suppressing air resistance while ensuring total invisibility for any type of radar. This nuclear bomber has flown for 15 years now at more than Mach 10. It can fly around the Earth in just a few hours without being seen. Naturally, such military research was to give rise to many commercial spin-offs. Over the last 10 years, we've seen the appearance of dozens of non-lethal armaments like E-bombs or electromagnetic bombs, as well as, of course, microwave weapons and powerful lasers. The U.S. Department of Defense, through the multinational Raytheon, decided to invest a gigantic amount of money in an experimental program called HAARP, or High Frequency Activate Auroral Research Program. And it was quite a program. Officially, the base in Alaska studies the ionosphere. In truth, the real possibilities of the installation are enormous. Climate manipulations, deep detection of underground base or deposits, silent and remote destruction of any object, and most important of all, manipulation of human behavior. So in 1996, a Russian satellite discovered in Antarctica the almost intact wreck of an immense